ultrarunning with the one and only Courtney Dauwalter.
Ultra running, yeah, we're talking way beyond your typical marathon, like 50K, 100 miles, even further sometimes.
And Dauwalter, she's not just competing at this level, she's dominating.
Many consider her the greatest of all time.
She doesn't really fit the mold of your typical, super disciplined type A ultra runner.
Right, you'd think someone at her level would be all about strict plans and, following every rule in the book.
Yeah, meticulously tracking every calorie, every mile. But Dauwalter, she's kind of doing her own thing. No coach, no rigid training plans. She even eats candy during races.
Candy, pizza, you name it. She's out there fueling her runs with, well, joy.
So how does she do it? How does this unorthodox approach translate to such incredible success?
Well, it starts with her unique approach to training. Instead of having a coach dictate her workouts, she does this thing she calls a full body assessment every morning.
A full body assessment?
Yeah, she checks in with herself, like, how's my body feeling? What's my energy like? How's my mental state?
Interesting. So she's basing her training on real-time feedback from her body.
Exactly. It's all about adapting to what she needs in that moment, not some predetermined plan. Most athletes have these detailed training plans, usually created by a coach, with specific mileage goals, workouts, and rest days. And that preparation often involves something called periodization.
Periodization, that's where they vary the intensity and volume of training, right?
Right.
So they're peaking at the right time for races.
You got it. And then there's the whole nutrition aspect. Ultra runners have to be really careful about what they're eating, making sure they're getting enough fuel for those long runs.
Which usually means lots of carbs, gels, energy bars, that kind of stuff.
Right. But Dauwalter, well, she has her own unique approach to fueling too. Remember the candy and pizza we talked about?
Oh yeah, how could I forget? It's not exactly what you'd expect from an elite athlete.
And yet it seems to be working for her. I mean, this woman has won over 50 ultra marathons in the last decade, often by huge margins.
And then there's her 2023 season, which was just legendary. She became the first person ever, male or female, to win ultra running's Triple Crown in a single season.
The Triple Crown, you're talking Western States 100, Hard Rock 100, and UTMB. 3 of the most prestigious and challenging ultra marathons in the world.
It's hard to even grasp how difficult that is, winning all 3 in 1 year. It's a feat that only one other runner, Kilian Jornet, has accomplished in his entire career.
And even he didn't do it in a single season. Dauwalter's achievement is just mind-blowing.
It really is.
Yeah.
And what's even more impressive is that for Dauwalter, it's not just about winning. She often talks about ultra running as a puzzle, a challenge to push her own limits and see what she's truly capable of.
Each race is a learning experience, a chance to unlock more of her potential.
It's like, for her, the journey is just as important as the destination.
Absolutely. But before we dive deeper into that journey, let's go back to the beginning, to her path to ultra running. You might be surprised to hear that it wasn't some straight shot to the top. Her background isn't exactly what you'd expect from an ultra running superstar. She had a pretty normal, active upbringing, played soccer, ran cross country in high school. She didn't even discover ultra running until her 20s. And what's even more inspiring is that she left a stable teaching job to pursue running professionally.
Talk about a leap of faith. It must have been a little scary to leave that kind of security behind.
Definitely. And it wasn't all smooth sailing from there either. I mean, she even dropped out of her first 100-miler.
Really? So even Dauwalter had setbacks?
Oh, yeah. Everyone faces challenges, even the greatest of all time. But those early struggles seem to have played a key role in shaping her mental resilience.
It's like those setbacks helped her build the strength and determination that she's known for today.
Exactly. They forced her to confront her limits, to learn from her mistakes, and ultimately to believe in herself even more.
It sounds like her family had a big influence on her mindset, too. She's talked about how her parents always emphasized effort over outcome, which is such a valuable lesson.
Definitely. It's about focusing on the process, on giving your best, regardless of the results.
And she has 2 athletic brothers, so I'm sure that healthy competition helped fuel her drive as well.
Oh, I'm sure. But it wasn't just about pushing herself to the limit. It was about finding joy in the process, too. And that seems to be a theme throughout her life, from her childhood coaches to her approach to running today.
It's like she understands that hard work doesn't have to be miserable. You can push yourself and still have fun doing it.
Right, and that's what makes her story so inspiring. But there's still so much more to uncover, especially when it comes to how she handles those moments of extreme pain and fatigue during those ultra-long races, How does she conquer the dreaded pain cave?
That's what I'm really curious about too. How does she push through when most people would just give up?
Well, that's where things get really fascinating. Dauwalter's relationship with the pain cave is unlike anything I've ever seen.
Yeah, that mysterious place that all endurance athletes talk about.
Right, and for most people, it's this thing to be avoided at all costs. You know, that point in a race or any really tough endeavor where your body's just screaming for you to stop.
Where every step, every movement feels like an impossible effort.
Exactly, and your mind starts playing tricks on you too. But Dauwalter, she has this completely different relationship with the pain cave.
It's almost like she embraces it, right?
Yeah.
Like she sees it as a challenge, not a threat.
She doesn't try to escape the pain, she leans into it. It definitely goes against conventional wisdom, but for Dauwalter, it's all part of that puzzle we talked about earlier.
Right, the puzzle of pushing her limits and figuring out what she's truly capable of.
The pain cave becomes another piece of that puzzle, a way to explore her own potential.
So instead of being this negative, scary experience, it becomes a source of information. It's like she's reframing the whole concept of pain, turning it into a tool rather than an enemy.
And what's even more fascinating is how she actively engages with the pain. She visualizes the pain cave as a physical space.
I read about that. It's not a dark, scary cave for her. It's more like a laboratory.
Exactly, a place where she can experiment, explore her own limits.
And she focuses on curiosity rather than suffering, asking herself questions like, why does this hurt?
Yeah.
What's happening in my body? How can I work with this?
And what's even more remarkable is that she maintains a sense of joy throughout the whole experience.
I've seen pictures of her smiling during races, even when she's clearly in a lot of pain.
And that brings us to her 2023 season, which was a perfect example of how even the greatest athletes face challenges and setbacks.
Right. After that historic Triple Crown win, she talked about how exhausted she was, both physically and mentally.
It took her much longer than usual to recover, and she was very open about how that impacted her performance in subsequent races.
Yeah, she even said that the Trans Gran Canaria 126K, which she won, was one of the hardest races she'd ever run.
And at Hard Rock, where she ended up breaking her own course record, she talked about how much she struggled that day.
It's a good reminder that success isn't always linear, even for someone like Dauwalter.
Exactly. There will always be ups and downs. It's how you handle them that matters.
And it highlights how important rest and recovery are, especially after pushing yourself to those extremes.
Absolutely. Sometimes you need to slow down to speed up, as they say.
So we've talked about Dauwalter's unconventional training, her incredible mental toughness, and even her setbacks.
But the question remains, what can we learn from all of this? How can we apply these insights to our own lives, even if we're not ultra runners?
Right, because let's be honest, most of us aren't out there running 100 miles.
But we all face challenges. We all have moments where we need to dig deep and push through discomfort.
So how do we tap into that Dauwalter spirit, that mental toughness and joy in the face of adversity? How can we use that to overcome our own obstacles? How can Devi actually apply those lessons to our own lives? Most of us aren't exactly training for 100-mile races.
True, but I think one of the biggest takeaways from Dauwalter's story is the importance of questioning assumptions. She basically threw out the rule book on how to train and succeed in ultra running. She showed us that there's not just one right way to do things.
So it's like she's saying, hey, maybe those rules are just guidelines, or maybe we're holding ourselves back by sticking to them too rigidly.
All the time, right? But Dauwalter reminds us to listen to our own intuition, to trust our own bodies and our own inner wisdom.
That's where her fuel tank based on joy philosophy comes in, right?
Exactly. It's not about depriving yourself or following some rigid diet plan. It's about finding what works for you.
Nourishing yourself in a way that feels good, both physically and mentally.
Right. And realizing that enjoyment and pleasure can actually be powerful fuels, too. When you find joy in what you're doing, it makes it so much easier to stick with it.
And let's not forget about that mental toughness, that whole pain cave thing.
She shows us that pain isn't something to be feared, but rather a source of information.
A challenge to be embraced, not avoided. And maybe, just maybe, we don't have to follow all the rules. Maybe, like Dauwalter, we can create our own path and find a way to make the journey, even with all its bumps, a truly rewarding one.